How do you begin writing a new story?
I think everything that I write that's original comes out of some inner obsession. So something I am freaked out about or obsessed with or afraid of or that I can't stop thinking about. There's always some core kernel of interest that comes out of that space. So even, one of the examples that I often use, and I haven't written anything about this, is for whatever reason, like I'm not a coffee drinker, but I know a ton of, almost everybody is a coffee drinker. So if I go there, if I start with that kind of, the question underneath that for me would be, why are people so interested in this thing that I'm not interested in? What does that mean about me? What does that mean about them? And I can mine that into perhaps a story about how valuable coffee is. Perhaps it's contraband in a world where coffee is rare. Perhaps there's somebody who doesn't like coffee who's hoarding this substance, right? So suddenly I begin to brainstorm something from this obsession that starts to manifest into a big question and then a character, and then who is that character? And then who is that character up against? Who is the person who's trying to get the coffee from this person? And suddenly, my brain is populating with all these ideas. And then I will solidify the character, solidify that antagonist, make clear decisions around what they're trying to do, and maybe there are other things they're up against. Maybe it's illegal to hoard the coffee and the police are involved. I don't know. But then I will create a log line from that. And begin to sort of sketch out the beginning, middle, and end, and then start using index cards to think of brainstorm moments. And then I'm off to the races. Then I'm sort of into the space of outline from that kernel of an idea.
That's interesting. Yeah, I know there's the tea drinkers, and then there's the coffee people, just like cat and dog people.
Yes.
And, and I think it's just a matter of palate. But yeah, it is fascinating as someone who's feels addicted to coffee. I can't see how anyone wouldn't need it in the morning.
Right.
But yeah, I know there's some people that are repulsed by it. So yeah, that's a good analogy. I like that. How do you put ideas into a beat sheet?
I think for me, the beat sheet comes after I've done I'll do my brainstorming on index cards. So I'll have a log line. The log line always suggests what my beginning, middle, and end are going to be. I'm a big fan of Sid Field's description of dramatic structure. And he talks about how, there are in every story, there are two plot points. He calls them plot points. And one is the moment that takes us from the beginning to the middle, sends us into the conflict. It's an event that as he says, spins the story in a new direction. So, and then on the other side of the conflict, there's what he calls plot point 2 that spins the story into a new direction, but this time toward a resolution. So the first thing that I do when I'm coming up with a story is I will put those events, those two plot points, on 2 index cards. One index card for plot point 1, one index card for plot point 2. Which, that's the beginning and ending of my conflict. And then I'll just say to myself, well, what else needs to happen? What needs to happen before that moment? What needs to happen in between, in the heart of the conflict? What needs to happen toward the end? And I just start writing on index cards and almost stream of consciousness. Well, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this. And I'll just keep making cards, as many as I can, until I run out of ideas. And I'll put them in order. And then once I have them, I'll go through and I'll separate out, I don't think I need that, or these two are the same, right? And then once I have those, then I'll start to, if I'm satisfied with the order and what is a loose structure at that point, I'll put those moments in a document, one after the other. And that's my beat sheet. This will happen first, this will happen second, this will happen third. And then I'm creating basically a list of actions that are going to take me and the character through the entire journey of the script.
And with some of the people that you coach, do you notice that they are mistaken about where their conflict is, or usually they know that better than anything?
I think often they have challenge is crystallizing the conflict. They'll know that it generally has to do with liberation, or looking at their life, a character's life, in a new way. But they won't necessarily say it's really about this person struggling to free themselves from a bad marriage. Like they'll be more general than specific usually. And then we have to sort of nail it down. Okay, great, I get the notion of liberation. How does that manifest? What's actionable about that? Like, what are the scenes we're going to see? Because we can't just see a scene of liberation. But if we talk about a marriage breaking up, or if we talk about somebody moving away from home, suddenly I can see scenes, packing a bag, getting on a train, getting money, running away, making phone calls, calling a lawyer. Like suddenly I'm into action space. Sometimes I have to invite people to step into more specifics in order to be able to, get an actionable, dramatic circumstance going.
What about new writers who put too much conflict and it needs time to sort of simmer?
Yeah, I mean, that certainly happens. I think on some level as a writing coach, I prefer that, because then there's more there rather than less there. We can always, in the same way that we can always rewrite, we can always take away stuff. So I prefer people showing up with a bunch of ideas of actionable things that they can put into their material. And then we can talk about whether we need all those things, or whether some of those things are actually the same thing. Whether the same scene where somebody, gets a divorce is the same scene where they, the couple actually comes to blows, or whatever. Like there are things that can overlap. There are actions that can become the same. And so I'd rather have an abundance of things coming from somebody I'm working with than less, which actually sort of goes to the way TV works. We throw out a bunch of ideas in the writer's room. And I heard somebody say, which I think is really smart, that you have to sort of build a mountain of the bad ideas to get to the good ideas. So the more ideas, the better, and then you can always pare away and make some decisions. I think that can be useful.
What are your thoughts on opening with conflict? Like if we go back to this coffee smuggler analogy, which is great, what if we open with, somebody breaks into their car in a parking lot, they just went to go get their own coffee, and somebody jimmies the lock and there's all this coffee beans, they take it out, and then there's a fight and someone's killed.
Yes, I mean, you can definitely start with action. And I think it's important to recognize that you still need the structure. There's always going to be beginning, middle, and end. So if you start with action, then my question for that is that action somewhere in the middle of the conflict? And so is that a flashback? Are we going to go back and then tell the audience how we got here, and so therefore have a beginning that ramps up to that moment? Or if we're going to start in this moment that has action and that kind of damage, are we going to come to some other turning point? Is it going to be that, our person with the coffee gets taken hostage, and the movie is really about the hostage crisis of this character and how that person's going to liberate themselves from that? So I think you can definitely start with action. The question is, where is that in the structure of what you're trying to do with this character? I think the hope is always to be engaging with your audience. So we do that a lot in TV. You might have a show like, on Tracker, the show that I was just working on, the pilot starts in the middle of a crisis with him doing a rescue, and then the story that happens in the pilot is an entirely different rescue. So you can do that too, where you start with action and adventure to bring people in, but then your story is going to unfold with a different circumstance.